It's like
Raf for life.
All right, welcome to the Golf Podcast Live with Raf and Mike. I'm Raphael, and out in Toronto, we've got Michael, as always, in Vancouver. You know, this is episode number 79. There's lots to talk about today, but we have a special guest. He is one of Portland's leading developers. He's a golf commentator and self-proclaimed journalist, as well as a Twitter golf blogger who has really gotten the attention of the golf industry, including a man named Phil Mickelson. Robert, welcome to the show.
I'm glad to be here.
Thanks for joining us, Robert. Looking forward to chatting with you immensely today.
Tell us a little bit about your love of the game and golf and how you got involved with golf and making these Twitter comments and writing a little bit about golf.
I got into golf when I was 16 years old. I went with my parents down to Arizona in the middle of the school year. They decided to be snowbirds, and I went to school down in Arizona, and I was bored to death. And a guy in their retirement community was a golfer and said he was going to go golfing. And I asked if I could go, but he said no. But he gave me a 7-iron and 4 balls and said, you can learn how to hit these and I'll take you golfing. So I literally went out and hit 7-irons in the desert. So I would hit the 4 balls and go chase them. And boy, as soon as I got back to Oregon, from there, I got a job at a golf course called Gerhardt by the Sea on the Oregon coast. It is the oldest golf course west of the Mississippi. You'll look it up on Wikipedia.
Oh, really?
Interesting.
Yep. Yeah. And Tim Boyle, the CEO of Columbia Sportswear, has bought it and done a fantastic job with that course. You play it back from the stones. It's not easy. That we have here in Oregon. So I worked at the golf course. Golf for me, you know, I think with most of us that fall in love with it, you know, once you hit that first great shot, you become addicted to that, and the never-ending journey to get better at it. So that's how I came to the game. And you know, it's a very solitary game in some ways, and you know, it was a way for me to be with myself and still. So yeah, loved it.
Yeah. It's you hit that one shot that really connects to your heart, and then it's done. You're addicted, and your life is arguably ruined because all we think about is golf from that point on.
Yeah, I always said I don't know if I'd rather go. If I had to die, should it be like after I hit the perfect bomb down the middle drive and I flop over a heart attack? Or would enjoy that, but I've joked about that before.
There's a guy died one morning at McCleary Golf Course out here, 88 years old, dropped dead on the 13th green, which is a really tough par 3. And he played every day, every single day, and died on the course he loves. So, you know, arguably it's a good way for him to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
No
Bob, let's pivot just a little bit. You know, what really got my attention is that you wrote something that really caught the attention of the industry as well. And you wrote a message to the players of the PGA Tour. I'm just going to read the beginning of it. You are all in trouble and screwed if you don't support the framework agreement. I've signed similar frameworks with institutional capital. So I also want to tell you that what's really going on with this agreement. And then you go on to telling us a little bit about your thoughts. What got you to write this and to share it with so many people? And were you surprised that it actually went viral and almost hit up 5 million people?
Yeah. So what really brought me to this was there were some protesters at the first LIV event here in Portland, which I think was their first U.S. event, right? And it caught my attention because one of the senators here, Senator Wyden, they had him speaking about LIV Golf and about the Saudis' investment in it. And, you know, I know about, you know, I've been involved in a lot of local politics here in Oregon and ballot measures and city politics. And when I saw him up there, I said, something doesn't smell right about this. Because, you know, I also know that PIF is in the investment world. And because I'm familiar with the capital markets, and I know that one, the United States can ban any entity, any person that they want from trading in our exchanges. That's why North Korea cannot buy stock on our exchanges.
Yeah.
That's for a reason. And I said, wait a minute, why are they picking on golfers when PIF is everywhere? That is
right.
That's intellectually dishonest.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, they're in Facebook and Uber and Tesla,
FedEx, you name it.
Disney, at least $500 million into the billions of dollars.
Mhm.
And so I right then and there thought, this isn't right. Somebody has set this up. It doesn't make any sense, because out in the business world. And so I got interested and I started looking into it and I got involved because I'm a passionate golfer. And I actually liked the idea of LIV when it first came out. I thought, well, this will be interesting. This is a way to, do something different that's maybe more exciting. That's not as, I love golf and frankly, I love the PGA Tour. I think the PGA Tour is great and I've always loved watching golf. But I also am not closed-minded and thought that this would be a great addition to the golf world, having teams, there's high school teams and college teams. So why not professional teams? And I became a fan of the concept right away. And then this protesting and this whole blood money narrative, which was intellectually dishonest, really got my attention. So that's what really brought me to it. And ultimately led to that, that post, which I can, talk to you more about, if you have more specific questions about it.
Well, there's, you've talked or touched a lot of points that we've discussed over the last year. And it makes me think of, just about 20 minutes before an episode, I believe it was with Mark Zecchino, TSN announcer last year. I just, on a whim, went through the PGA Tour sponsors, not knowing who's what, but I'm going to see who does business in Saudi Arabia. And basically everyone I chose had some sort of operation in Saudi Arabia, like John Deere, Honda, you name it. I went through the list and it's like, well, and then within a few days, Greg Norman came out and he said there's 27 or 33 different sponsors that all have operations there. And it's just so hypocritical that, the Saudi money is spread across the globe. So if you want to be, on your high moral horse, then you better start banning, everything around you.
Absolutely. And that's what really brought me to this and got me interested in it. And, since then I just wanted to learn more about it and got educated about it, got interested in seeing, the vitriol. I mean, it was so crazy to me to see so much vitriol and people so against LIV. It just didn't make sense. And it really came from a narrative that the PGA Tour put out, or the leadership of the PGA Tour put out initially, going down that road. Jay Monahan and his crew, they dragged the 9/11 victims' families into this.
That's awful.
And to me, knowing that PIF is everywhere, that was just a disgusting move. And and even shows now more, that they really didn't mean it. They're now like, okay, we'll partner with them like everyone else, and they, I don't care what anybody says, they've been pressured into doing this. They're not coming from a position of strength. They know that if this were to keep going, they couldn't keep up.
And Jay Monahan needs to be a little bit more transparent. Sometimes I feel like Ted Knight, and I'm listening to him and I'm thinking, well, we're waiting, right? I don't know when he's going to actually divulge the information that he should. PGA Tour executive Ron Price said under oath, like you actually posted, that they will bring $2.1 billion in the 23 season, right? And the math was all off. So tell us a little bit about that, because Phil also said, interesting math, Bob. So he was talking about your tweet. And so tell us about that, about the math on what he was saying under oath.
Well, so, they don't have their books open. So none of us really know, right? So, that post was a question. Did this guy just, say under oath, that that, and I said, wait, the revenues are going to be 2.1 billion and they're going to give $1 billion to the players. So it didn't take me long. I just went online and I found the entire 22, 20, they publish all of this, the 22, 23 purses for all of the tour events. And now the PGA of America, the ones that like the US Open and, any kind of money from that and, the British Open isn't paid for by the tour itself. Right. So I added up all of the tour prize money. And then I went to the Champions Tour and added up every 22, 23 event. And I went to the Corn Ferry Tour and the Latin American Tour. The Latin American Tour, by the way, is just a hair under $2 million. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, wait a minute, I looked at the tax returns for the tour and I saw that 9 executives make more than the entire purse of the Latin American Tour. So these people are, the player is playing for nothing. Their total purses was $1,990,000. I remember it.
It's like our Canadian tour.
Yeah. I mean, it's really underfunded. They really haven't tried to play that game, like that. So I did all the math and I looked at the last available tax return, and they put in 160 million, something like that, into the player's retirement plan. And so when I added up every prize money, PIP had gone up to 100 million, and then it went back down to 50 million. So I added up all of those dollar figures, and there was a $350 million hole in the math. Came to 341 point something million dollars. So it's actually $58 million difference in his math. And I'm like, okay, look, are you fabricating this? Or if you're not, tell us why there's this hole. Tell us about this.
Because it didn't go into the new headquarters, did it?
No. So you wonder, like, how much of this is actually real and how much isn't. I actually went through their tax returns, because I've never thought about that or been interested in doing that before. But I wanted to get a sense of where their money was going, and they have to publish all of their leadership.
Not for profit.
Yeah. So their board and their executives, it's all published. And it's interesting because I saw that they get paid out of 3 different buckets. And I'm curious to know what those 3 buckets are. I suspect one's just kind of their straight up wages, but I think the second one is somehow related to their advertising revenue. It's a related business to the PGA Tour. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, if they're making millions of dollars in salary at Monahan, and then another several million out of the separate related entity, what is that? And is that, and I'm suspecting that it has something to do, but they're not open and transparent about this. I'm suspecting it has something to do with their TV revenue business or something like that. Mm-hmm. They have another one that I think is all the jets and, their fringe benefits and stuff like that. So if you go across and, add them all up, that's kind of how I figured all that out.
And all this would have come out in the courtroom had it gone that far, correct?
Right.
So
and that's why they closed that whole. That's why the framework agreement was made, so that all these lawsuits could be squashed, because everything would have been brought to light, and I think a lot would have been exposed.
Yeah.
And Phil Mickelson in many ways would have been vindicated when it came to talking about greed in general.
100%. And goodness knows what else they were doing. I'm sure they were really afraid of the monopolistic, potential monopolistic behavior. Right. Who knows what emails were out there, anything. If the people they hired, Coit was their public relations firm, and did they hire them or did they not? The Wall Street Journal actually came out and said they did. So, maybe they got some information when I read the article, but I think all that was going to come out, and getting to the framework agreement, when that came out, I read it, and I was really interested that the take on it was, the LIV's going to be gone, Monahan's going to get to choose. That's still the narrative that's out there. And but
I think that was the media's narrative. Wasn't that more fabricated by the media and those who were on the inside?
But I think the tour, I mean, I think they literally, to avoid pitchforks and tar from the players, were the section I pointed out was like, wait a minute, it says here that they're going to do an empirical evaluation of LIV. But then part two, in which Jimmy Dunn came out and said, we're going to do that, and kind of inferring, and if it's not good, we're going to get rid of it. But the part two of that, the next sentence said, and that they're going to be required to, figure this team thing out and figure out how to integrate it and doing it. And it wasn't what the public narrative was. And it surprised me that golf media wasn't actually reading this. They, like you said, they were just doing part one and not talking about part two, which required the management to, figure the teams out. And then when it came to the section about the veto consent rights, I kept reading. I read it over several days, say, look, am I reading this wrong or am I right? It turns out, by the way, that where I ended up landing ended up being right, because I actually went through, when the Senate had their hearings, I ended up printing out the full stack of the record, which included a bunch of the emails and the negotiations back and forth for the agreement. The drag and tag rights and the ability to invest first dollars were already in there. And then they added the veto consent rights, which is what my hunch was. And I said, wait a minute, I've got I'm a real estate guy. I've done institutional deals. That means I've partnered with an institutional partner, and we both put in money. They want me to take care of it all and build it and run it and do what we're doing. But they have a list of veto consent rights in our partnership agreement that doesn't allow me to do certain things. Like I can't just go out and sell the project or the building. I can't spend more than a certain amount of money without their approval. Or I have to agree to stick to our agreed upon business plan, and any variation of that, I have to get their approval. And so when I read that, I was like, wait a minute, I know, and I've seen other ones as well. And I said, everyone's missing the biggest point of this whole framework agreement, which is, Yasser Al-Rumayyan. He has the ability to, through veto consent rights to, make some pretty big control decisions, which, probably they really didn't want out there. As a fan of LIV and the PGA Tour coexisting, I'm not sure they wanted me to post that because but the reality is I thought that the golfing world should know about this, and I think they should be transparent about it.
I love the fact that you're bringing all of this up, because right from the get-go, Mike and I are huge golf fans. We've been playing the game, obviously, since we were kids as well. I'm a golf teaching professional, spent my last 25 years in the golf industry. Mike's one of the top amateur golfers in BC, and he spent his life in golf as well and in business. But borrowing money so that you could meet your reserve to operate is pretty crazy with the amount of money they were trying to be competitive with. Right.
Yeah.
So how are they able to sustain all of this capital infusion? Just looking at this weekend, the winner got $18 million. Yeah. The person in last place got $500,000. And that just, we're talking about a substantial amount of money, never mind the operating cost of every single event. I know they have a number of sponsors, but this model is not sustainable. In addition to everything being exposed, it looked like the PGA Tour was going to fold. Those on the inside knew that something was very wrong here.
Yeah, there's no way mathematically, you're right, they could sustain it. And that's what I figured out when I'm looking at it. I'm like, this just doesn't add up. And, it's sad because, really it could be pretty simple. And I think that they're going for the Formula One model. I liken it. I've been saying, look, the tours like NASCAR and LIV is like Formula One. Both are great products. They're different, and you can coexist and have both of those. And I think that where the leadership broke down is that Jay Monahan should have said right away in the beginning, let's sit down and work this out. Yeah, you have the PGA Tour like it is with its meritocracy or whatever. And maybe, I have some different views on that. I think they should sign the players, honestly, if they make it and get more than that $500,000. But let's say that they keep the tour sort of like it is, have maybe a couple elevated events, and then maybe get rid of the fall events, which they haven't really wanted to do for the last couple of years, if you read read about it. And so you have all these fall events, and they really could have had a situation where you had these tour players, they had teams, and then, LIV, like Formula One, is more of a worldwide phenomenon. That you can go around to golf star places like Adelaide showed in Australia. Singapore, the state of Singapore, I was told, underwrote virtually the entire cost of LIV stop there, which is kind of interesting, because once I got out there, I started getting all these direct messages from people in the know. And I was told that Hong Kong, really wanted it badly, and they're willing to pay a lot more than the others to go there. So there's these areas of the world that if they had some creative leadership and some visionary leadership, they could say, wait a minute, we could have the tour and we could have these great stops with all the star power going around the world. And it's like, you go to a Formula One event, you have the Virgin tent and you have the T-Mobile tent, and you have all these, and I could see like them selling sponsorships and having the star go through and really make it like a great, 4-day event where you can watch the practice round, and then the actual, playing rounds would be fantastic. And I think that in that way, to grow the game would be, fantastic. I just don't get why people I think they're so against it because the narrative went out right away that it was bad, evil. But the reality is it's not. It's great and it's fun. And I think if you think about it, you could have 10 people on a team. Let's say, the high flyers had 10 people. They may be trying to play their way on a team, and out of that 10 players, maybe only 4 get to go to an event. The ones that are playing the best get to go to these
absolutely
star events, and you could have trades, and you could have
100%.
Individual sponsorship for the teams and home courses, and like we've talked a lot about this, and I thought, in their first year, it played well on the final day in Miami. It was actually pretty interesting to watch, and we know they're looking at it as a beta year because they only did 7 events. So, and they, from Centurion Club in London to Portland, they already made changes, and they were tweaking as they went along. And as you have to give them credit for, because they're new. Like the PGA Tour has been on lather, rinse, and repeat for decades, and it's been, we all love golf, and obviously, there's some tournaments are going to be very compelling versus others, but it's new, and Jay screwed up. He put this hard wall up, and if you ever want to solve a problem, personal or in business, if you're not communicating, you're never going to solve it. And like I always thought Jay could have said right out of the gate, like, look, you're allowed 3 exemptions a year to go play elsewhere. Why don't we make it 6 and let you guys go experiment?
Absolutely. And we'll be part of it. We'll help. We'll help promote it and share it, like kind of like they're doing now. There was no reason to create all of this division, drag these families of these victims into this. That whole narrative it's tragic, honestly, because you have so many people. Like, it's interesting, like on these posts I've done, there's some really vitriolic stuff that people are saying, I don't care. I love, I literally don't care. And so, it's shocked me how harsh people are, on both sides of it. And I'm truly a person who would love to see a healthy PGA Tour, would love to see LIV events go around the world. And frankly, if you think about it, with all of this coming together, I think it'd be interesting to see, Tiger and Rory's new sort of virtual that could, if they were actually thoughtful and they got in a room together, they could probably figure out how to do kind of mesh that into
tie it all in, because I think they're doing that for the fall series, where they'll have the virtual competitions in these stadiums. They got cities involved as well as stadiums, so they actually have home locations, which was a big deal. I always thought that each team should have their home location, so that you could have fans buying merchandise and follow players. And as you said, even teams 10 to 16 players, you go 2v2. You get, 8 teams to go out, 4 are sitting on the bench based on the fact that if someone's hurt or can't make it for whatever reason or going to another event. Now, the PGA Tour really only has the PGA Tour events. The only flagship event is the Players' Championship. Right. So most people think the PGA Tour is part of the majors. The same way that we're discussing the Ryder Cup right now and how only PGA Tour players should play, you're representing your country. You're not representing the tour. And so that's why Bryson DeChambeau and Dustin Johnson and Brooks Koepka should be in consideration to make the Ryder Cup team, considering they did so well in their tour and the previous Ryder Cup. And I love your comments on F1 too, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, the reason they're not is because the narrative that Monahan and company pushed out of the gate was so negative and so forth. And it was really, it all comes down to, people want to blame Phil or DJ or whoever for going over and somehow abandoning the tour. But the reality is that, these players, came to Monahan before. They certainly had a chance. Once he knew that this was real, he certainly had a chance to sit down. And in my view, there was no one more to blame for this entire mess than Jay Monahan, because he didn't have the leadership and the vision. And I keep going back to why. I always go back to money and power.
When you think just follow the money trail.
And to me, something still doesn't smell right there. Why would you not want to do this? What revenue do you think you're going to lose? And look, I get it. The tours had to build up over a number of years and they finally got to this place. But I believe that, they had this sort of fiefdom, at PGA headquarters, and that they saw this as a threat to their own power and their own maybe revenue. And that's what drove this because they don't want to be out of power. I mean, that's why something like that is driving, that poor decision making. And I don't get it when they don't realize that if they would have sat down and if they are doing it correctly now, that they actually become a better leader and more powerful because they're willing to accept vision and accept change, while frankly holding on to some of the best traditions of golf. I mean, I like the traditions of golf, and I like the majors, and I like, some parts of, having to earn your way on the tour, but it can be developed in such a greater way. So
but we have to accept innovation in our sport. It's been happening for, the golf's been around a long time, and innovation is okay. So that we're all going to love the PGA and the history on tour, but it's okay to see some of these new elements come into effect. So I makes me wonder if Tim Fincham were still running the tour, how he would have handled that, right? Or would have been more of the same.
I wonder if I've actually wondered, is he part of the problem? Because Monahan was sort of his lieutenant.
Yes.
Fincham, by the way, if you look at the tax return, Fincham's still getting paid $800,000 a year. For in return. I was shocked. And then he's got a relative.
Wow. That's half the Latin American budget.
Right. Almost. I mean, and he's got a relative that works on the tour, because they have to disclose it if a key, if the key person's relative, and somehow he's still a key, maybe he's on the board. I can't remember, but he's still getting paid a lot of money. And I wonder deep down, because he felt he really built this up when, frankly, it was really Tiger bringing money and fans.
Wow.
So I wonder, did Fincham, did he feel like he was grew this thing, and now, he still wants to control? I just don't know. But
it really feels like crooked politics. Everything that we're talking about just feels like people have been paid off or asked not to speak. You've got people telling you what to do and what not to say. And then you've got the NBC Golf Channel narrative with Brandel Chambly and Eamon Lynch, like they have an axe to grind. But I don't understand why they're so set on certain things. They're obviously right about what's happened to reporters and human rights issues. No one disagrees with them with that. But if you go down that rabbit hole, you're going to find hundreds of situations with different companies and individuals. And that's what all these lawsuits are about. It's about defamation.
Yeah. Well, I remember when I was a kid, I actually had a friend's dad who was in World War II and fought against the Japanese. And I remember that he had some sort of a business with the Japanese, and he had actually fought. And I remember thinking, well, how could you do that? Because you're at war, with these. And, I remember that, I can't remember the exact words, but something like, the world moves forward and these things happen. I think it's smart to, have, be eyes wide open if we're dealing with any foreign investment, frankly. But I also look at our own, what do you think that we've had completely clean hands as a country?
That's right.
Yeah. I remember
100%.
In like 2001, the Senate finally declassified a bunch of stuff, and it was sort of behind, Gerald Ford when he was president. President Ford signed an executive order that said the United States government can't kill an employee, can't have somebody killed because they got caught trying to do it and do it. So, it's like, so are we a bad country for the rest of the ages? And so my view is I get that, and eyes wide open, but I also think that the more that we have strong business and personal ties with anybody, I think, frankly, it's harder for them to be a bad actor the more they're invested, because if we choose to, as a country, we can take all that away. We can disinvest if we chose to.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think the more ties that we have to people that may have had a history, the more that, we can help influence them to do the right thing in the future.
Mm-hmm.
It's just,
Yeah. No, that's good points. And right, you look at F1 in its entity, and they have arguably one of their best tracks in Saudi Arabia. And not a peep, no one says a word about F1, but all of a sudden the golfers again are being held on this ridiculous pedestal, and Eamon Lynch touting off and all of that. And when I was at the Pumpkin Ridge event last year, it was funny being in the press room because the writers were all running around trying to find the scoop, and I could hear certain ones on the phone asking about what DJ did and this. I'm just it was kind of comical because it's seriously, you guys are trying to turn over rocks to find any little bit dirt to throw at these guys, and they're just playing fucking golf. They're playing golf. They're professionals.
They're athletes.
They're and I on Tuesday I walked around with some of the players, and I followed McDowell, Perez, and Taylor Gooch for a while, and that's pretty close to them. I could hear them. They were in the midst of griping about the PGA Tour, and it's basically, to sum it up, is they weren't listened to ever. So and they've had enough, and that's why they're out there. And look at it now. It's they're still not being listened to, and we got Tiger on the board. Is that going to make a difference? It just
feels like they pulled all the color and characters out of the game. So all the guys who were really in the spotlight, had social media presence, were outspoken, and the reason why people like to watch these colorful characters on television or stream them, and they're all out. All of those guys just walked away and took the deal. Now that they're back in some sort of framework agreement, the players that stayed really feel like they lost out on some real good security, not only for their families but for their whole team. And it's really sad, because you don't know how big your window is as a golf professional. So if you're at the top of your game and you do have an offer, you might not be one of these players that lasts out there 20 years. Although this sport is very, very generous, and it's encouraging that these golfers could have longer careers than other professionals, but you never know. So
anything really can happen, right? Like Len Matisse in 2003 and 4 had best run of his life, breaks both his knees skiing. He's never been the same.
Right.
So anything can happen. You got to strike when the iron's hot.
I was tough from the beginning. Another thing that makes sense to me about LIV is it gets harder to win when you're past 30, right? In golf, it's always going to be easier when you're younger, like any sport. And what so from the time you're like 30, 35 till you're 50 years old and you can get on the Champions Tour, you're sort of in golf purgatory, in some ways. And so there was a natural, I mean, there's so many ways they could have made LIV a natural way for some of those stars that needed to slow down, let their bodies heal a little bit longer, not play as much, not go through the grind, as much. There were so many possibilities. And I really hope they get there and figure it out. I'm hoping that Yasser doesn't fold to these guys, because I think that they'll cut him off at the knees. If he trusts them, I think he's making a huge mistake, because I think deep down, if they get a chance, that they would knife him in the back. Because I mean, look what you guys just talked about. The leadership of the PGA Tour knifed their own players straight in the back by doing what they did. And they'll do the same thing to a business partner.
But they would deny that until they were blue in the face. That's what's really sad. And that's why someone like Jay needs to go. This is my personal opinion from the outside in, seeing the big picture and reading and watching everything that we've seen. But it's sad. It's sad. Hey, let's pivot for a bit. Let's talk about you, Bob. Bob, what are you doing right now in Oregon? Are you working on any projects? Let us know what's happening.
I am. It's in the real estate world right now. It's a time of turmoil, which I've been through a lot of cycles now. So that means there's opportunity. The rise in interest rates. This is getting really wonky, and it's my profession full time. But the rise in interest rates means that you can go out and buy a treasury now for the same return you used to get on a building. So it means you have to get a higher return on the building if you buy it to take that risk. And that means the valuation of those buildings have decreased. So there's a number of projects that were being built that their interest reserves, because if interest went up, have exploded, and they're worth less, even though they're still producing the same cash flow when they're done. So if you know what you're doing, that's actually an opportunity.
Okay, there you go.
It is. They're saying that in North America, over 25% of families are defaulting on their mortgages right now.
I don't know. I haven't heard that. That's interesting, but it
is in Canada. We're reaching 20% right now through the Bank of Canada. I'll give you an example. I spoke to a good friend of mine this morning. He works for the government. His mortgage rate went up, and that meant $1,000 more a month. Yeah, and that's a substantial change to your day-to-day expenses and inflation.
And so I'm in the multifamily business, so big apartment buildings, and I built them, owned them, operated them. That's what I do. And so what happens is, thank goodness I had loans in place with lower interest rates that were locked in, and I didn't have variable rate interest rates. But what happens, just like these families, there are owners of apartment buildings whose payments, let's say their loans come due, it's producing a healthy cash flow that it always did, but it can't service as much debt. So you're seeing people finish projects that are literally worth less than what it cost them to build it, and without additional equity, they don't have the ability to refinance these things. And so there's people that have been around a while. You're seeing all the big institutional, the BlackRocks, Blackstones, and Goldman Sachs in the world. They're all
heard of BlackRock.
They're all raising big real estate funds because they're like any of us that can have been around for a while and seen this. And I started when I was 19 years old. So
so you remember 2008, 2009 when the recession hit and everything went up for sale for dirt cheap?
Yeah, no, I sold a high rise. It closed January 28th of 2008. And I built this big high rise and sold it, and made a bunch of money. And then the world hit, and I ended up getting a block in the Pearl District here in Portland at the price of the debt. The owners were going to walk away from it, which was shockingly low. These days, $5.6 million. And I was able to then build a new apartment building on that. And I was the first one in this great area of Portland that came out of the Great Recession, because I saw we were still absorbing, 150, 65 units a quarter, but there was no new building going on. So I said, look, we're going to run out of units for people to live in. And so I was able to build that project. And by the way, on that one, I had an institutional partner and they had veto consent rights, but yeah, we did great on that project. We hit the timing just right. And so,
Bob, you could have bought 5 to 6 golf courses in Florida for that at the time.
Yeah. So, it's been a great business for me. I'm really, I feel really blessed. It's been, frankly, a lot of hard work. I started when I was really young and bought one little house. I worked at a golf course and I bust tables in the evening, saved my pennies, and bought a little house in Eugene, Oregon, where I was going to college, and learn how to renovate it. And that was my start. And I've been doing it.
Awesome.
Since. Yeah.
Good for you. That's a true entrepreneurial story. That's awesome.
So, yes.
Well, Robert, I just want to say thank you for joining us. It's been a very interesting talk. We got to cover a couple of the angles. We'd love for you to come back on. Maybe when we're out west, we'll get a round of golf in as well.
Yeah. I'm terrible. I'm not as good as you guys. I'm a hacker, but I'm a hacker who loves the game. So.
But if you're ever up here in Vancouver, I'm trying to get Raph to smarten up and move out west. But if you're ever up here, just let me know, and I'll take you out to Mayfair. And
Awesome.
and I'll bug you if I head south and through Oregon. I'd love to play with you.
Absolutely. I'm a member of Columbia Edgewater here, where they're going to have the LPGA. Watch it on TV this week. It's a beautiful course.
Yeah.
Google
Sweet.
Columbia Edgewater Annika Sorenstam green. She said they're the best greens she's ever seen.
Really?
Yes, Oregon gets a lot of rain, and Columbia Edgewater, interestingly, both the greens and the fairways are all POA, because it gets in POA. If you have enough, they're like carpet. They're fantastic. So.
Yeah, I grew up in Montreal watching F1 and playing on POA golf courses, right? So it's all POA Annua out there. Yeah, they're fantastic. They're inconsistent in coloring sometimes, where they look patchy, but they're fantastic greens.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
so
here in Vancouver, it's all cannabis. So
that's great.
So we're going to share this, Mike, right? We're going to put this. We're on 18 different platforms
we'll share
now.
it.
Most
it's
audio
live on YouTube at the moment, and we'll share it on social shortly. And tomorrow it'll be up on all the major podcast platforms. So if anyone listening, please throw us a subscribe, a like, a share. Any engagement goes a long way.
All right, take care, Bob. All the
Thank
best.
you, guys. It was a real pleasure.
Bob, yeah, thanks very much. Look forward to more commentary. Maybe we'll circle back in a few months when the story develops more. We'd love to get some more insight from you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Just hold on for a moment, Bob. We're going to stay on for a second. We're just going to turn off the feed.
Okay.